Hello, and welcome to my podcast. Whether you're walking to work, having a cup of coffee, or just seeking positive vibes, join me as I share timeless wisdom and practical tools to make your life better. Grief never ends, but it changes. It's a passage, not a place to stay. Grief is not a sign of weakness, nor a lack of faith. It is the price of love. How are you doing, my amazing people? I'm grateful that you're listening to me once again as I share my experiences, as I share wisdom, and as I try to make your life better by helping you be able to deal with real life challenges. And I really appreciate each one of you for always taking your time. If you're new here, welcome. And if you've been with me, thank you, and thank you again. So today I just want us to talk about grief. I know that death and loss is an inevitable part of life, and I can attest to this because since 2020 I've experienced death of family. I've experienced the death of acquaintances, and it's hit home really hard because the deaths have been happening more frequently, and I think I've been awake. It doesn't mean before 2020 I didn't experience death. I did, but right now I realize that as I'm on this self-development journey, death and loss needs to also be processed, because the death of family members and acquaintances has caused me pain, and I know that I'm ready to deal with the pain it has brought me. But how do I process losing a close relative? How can I also help each one of you out there who has lost a loved one? Let's dive in and learn how to start the journey of healing. So many of us beat ourselves up for grieving in a certain way, or we don't even know what to say to a friend who is mourning someone. We'd love a roadmap for grieving the right way, but there's no such thing. Grieving is an incredible individual process. And what I want to share is that everybody dies right on time. And I know it's really off-putting to be told this when you're going through grief, because it's not a thought that you can understand or agree with. But with time, when you start the healing journey, I hope you can come to embrace the possibility of these words. What I have learned is that when the pain associated with losing a loved one comes from regret, blame, and shock, there isn't pure healing. I have learned and want to believe that grief is a feeling that we should all welcome in our lives because it heals. But when we mix it with arguing that it should not have happened, which is what we continually do, most of us, for even 1 or 2 years after the person has died, we cause so much unnecessary pain that it isn't grief at all. It becomes suffering. And grief is so different and so unique for every individual. But what I see so much is that instead of us just allowing it to be what it is, we just heap judgment. We go to a stage where we are angry at God and things like questioning him, like, why did I live and not your loved one, or not the person who died. You get angry at yourself for not calling them often to know how they were doing. You get angry even at the person. For some of us, get angry at the person who died. We get angry at the circumstances. The circumstances would have, should have been, could have been. And this adds unnecessary pain on top of ourselves and turn that pain into suffering. So my friends, what I want to offer is that when we argue with what is true and when we worry about what could be, when we try to control the circumstances, we never win. We never win. And that grief is part of the human experience. And it can be very healing. And something else I would love to share is that time has nothing to do with grief, because we've embraced this saying, just give it time, you'll be okay. It's not the amount of time that passes, it's what you do with the time. It's what you choose to think during that time. It's what you choose to make the grief mean during that time. And I know in this conversation we are talking about grief as it relates to death, but of course we grieve for many other reasons like divorce or losing a job. Anytime we have change or loss, grief is typically what we get. But when we think about it in terms of tasks that we accomplish during mourning and accepting reality and processing pain and figuring out how to live in the absence of the loved one and finding a way to remember them, then it's much more useful. Because we are thinking about what we want to accomplish as we mourn, as opposed to how should we do it or what stages do we need to go through. Okay, so if I have people that are listening and they are struggling with grief like I was, or maybe you have someone in your life that may be struggling with grief, and not only death, you can have grief because someone has lost their job. You can have grief because someone's going through divorce. All those things that people lose. Then how can you make it less harder? How can we help you? How can we help each other? Here's the thing, I would encourage you to talk to someone. This is the first step. Either a professional or a friend who can understand you. Or even if it's paying witness to your own story through journaling or some other creative outlet. The thing is, you have to be able to tell it and process it and come to terms with accepting it before you can do anything else. You need to be able to just process what it is that has happened. Be able to tell your story as many times as often as you need to until you're okay with it. Because remember, grief is a feeling. So if you don't process it, like if you don't come to terms, if you don't accept, then you'll be causing suffering. Because as I always say, your thoughts affect how you feel. So you continue the cycle. I've lost my job. The thoughts will be, I'm not doing enough. I don't have enough in my life. What will you continue creating? You continue creating feelings of feeling that you're not good enough. If it is a death situation, I have lost my friends. Why did I not do any better? Why did I not call her? So you keep on continue blaming yourself. What feelings will you create? Bad feelings, feelings of guilt. And so the cycle will continue and you'll continue causing suffering. But you need to accept that it's okay. I did not call them. And maybe this is a chance where I learn I need to call my friends. I need to check up on the other friends that I have left. If you've lost your mom, which is hard because it's a person that you are living with, you say, I've lost my mom. She's gone. It is hard for me, but I choose to embrace what she's left behind, and I choose to look for the goodness that she's left behind. So in that moment, we just create a feeling of relief. I choose to let her go, and in that moment, you embrace love and also caring. You start, caring to see what your mom left behind, the goodness that she left behind. If it's your spouse, the same thing. Just make sure you create positive thoughts and positive feelings with the time that you have. Just remember that. Then if you take 2 years, just make sure in that time that you're taking, it is for you to process. So step 2, you need to understand what you have the ability to control and what you don't. Just understanding that this is part of the human experience and it does happen sometimes. Because when you keep on embracing the judgmental thoughts, like the blame, like the anger, you keep on creating suffering to things you can change. Okay, so what I've learned about grief, and even from my own experience about grief, is that it's an amazing healing process to go through when you've lost someone or something. And I think that if you do it without all of the judgment and the anger and the blame and the pointing of the fingers and the hate, you will find healing and it will be useful and serve you. So let's embrace grief as a learning tool and accept it for it to serve us. So till next week's episode, God bless, sending you love and light. Cheers.